One Piece is a long story, and one would assume in a story as long as One Piece that the author would make at least a couple of mistakes. Some inconsistencies, some characters not abiding by the rules set up by the universe, or maybe, at the very worst, a couple of plot holes. And while One Piece does have all of these problems, on a length to plot hole basis, One Piece is one of the most tightly run ships maybe in manga ever. Now, is that because Oda is the most cognizant writer of all time and makes sure that he never includes things that could potentially become plot holes down the line? No, not really. Rather, it's a symptom of the fact that Oda has had more time with his manga to patch up old plot holes than any other mangaka in living history. But still, the same result has been achieved. One Piece fundamentally has very few plot holes, and even less important ones. In fact, I've been poring over Quora and Reddit forums for about an hour now, and so far as I can tell, One Piece has only got about 7 plot holes that mean anything. And today, I want to go over those plot holes and talk about whether or not I believe they're plot holes. And more importantly than that, talk about if Oda has done anything to plug these plot holes over the course of his 1100 plus chapter manga. Because, like I stated, there is definitely some plot holes in One Piece. A lot of the ones that get brought up all the time actually have answers. Now, are they good answers? Well, you'll have to wait and see. And therefore, with no further ado, let's get directly into One Piece's worst plot holes explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video every single week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to the last episode of Gaara versus Rock Lee. So before we dive into this list, I want you to know that these plot holes are gonna be ranked, and that I do have like a kind of system for ranking them. See, I'm gonna be ranking the 7 plot holes that I could find that I believe had any kind of plot impact whatsoever, based on A, whether or not I believe this plot hole to actually be one, or B, based off possible answers that the One Piece manga gave us for this plot hole that therefore invalidate it as such. Now, that technically doesn't mean that the answers have to be good. However, if the manga has provided us with answers, well then, yeah, we can't consider it a plot hole. There's an in-universe explanation. Now, is that in-universe explanation infuriating? Maybe, but it's still an answer, which is why we have coming up at our number 7 spot, explaining all of One Piece's worst plot holes, Shanks losing his arm. See, this technically isn't a plot hole. Yes, I can sit here and say that there's no reason that Shanks, who was Yonko level at the time that he saved Luffy's life, should have lost his arm to the Sea King outside of Gashu Village. Not only does Shanks have some of the most powerful Conqueror's Haki in the entirety of the One Piece universe, Conqueror's Haki that he could have used to knock out the Lord of the Coast without moving a muscle in his body, but also Shanks has things like Armament Haki, which he could have very easily used to make his arm much harder than anything the Lord of the Coast could have bitten through. And all this is assuming that Shanks needed to be on the defensive against a Sea King from the East Blue. Shanks could have killed the Lord of the Coast faster than it knew what was happening. There is no reason that a man who is able to simply sail into the War of the Best and say, listen, you guys are gonna stop fighting, and if you don't, you're gonna have to fight me, and then the war called the War of the Best just stopped because nobody wanted to fight him, would lose his arm to a Sea King. I mean, like a 70-year-old Rayleigh swam through the calm belt. Luffy knocks out the Lord of the Coast at 16 with 1 punch. So why did Shanks, one of the 5 strongest people in One Piece, well, wait, hold up. Emu, Blackbeard, Luffy? Scopper's gotta be up there. And Rayleigh's still got it. Emu, Blackbeard, oh, Mihawk, oh god, Bonnie's got 5th gear. Oh, I gotta do this list at some point. But regardless of whether or not you like the explanation that we were given as to why Shanks lost his arm, we were given an answer. And that answer was Shanks bet his left arm on the future generation of pirates. Shanks was willing to weaken himself with the loss of his left arm to make a physical bet to himself that the next generation, i.e. Luffy, would be the generation of pirates to change the world. Now, sprinkle in some conspiracy theories about the idea of the Mark of the Abyss being on his left arm, and Shanks wanting to get rid of his Mark of the Abyss to sever his ties to the world government, and you have what is a at least semi-satisfactory answer to answer the question of why Shanks allowed for his left arm to be ripped off. But is that as infuriating as an answer as we have for our number 6 spot? Who's to say? Because coming up at number 6 on our list of One Piece's worst plot holes, we have Kaido could have killed himself whenever. Now, one of the first things that we ever see from Kaido, the world's strongest beast, is literally him hucking himself out of the sky in hopes that when he hits the ground, well, he goes splat. All that is to say that one of the core tenets of Kaido was that he wants to commit suicide. He wants to unalive himself. Another TikTok safe way to say blowing your shit smooth off. And thus, because when we're introduced to Kaido, he's literally trying to end his own life, a lot of people ask the question, if Kaido did truly want to die, why didn't he just like, oh, I don't know, walk into the ocean? Also, he's a devil fruit user. He ran a factory that created artificial devil fruit. You die if you try to eat a second devil fruit. Just eat a second devil fruit. There were a million ways that Kaido could have ended it all. Just like that. And yet Kaido was trying to find the most convoluted, over-the-top, complicated ways to end himself, none of which worked. So why wasn't he going the simple route? Was it because he was too stupid to think about throwing himself into the ocean? Or because he didn't know that if you try to eat 2 devil fruits, you die? Well, no, neither of those are the truth. See, well, yes, 100%. If Kaido threw himself into the ocean, he would sink. He would lose all of his power, he would lose his will, and he would float down to the bottom of the ocean like a stone. However, he wouldn't die. Oh, Nick, what do you mean? Wouldn't he drown like all of the other devil fruit users who have fallen into the ocean? No. Kaido's devil fruit is the fish fruit model Azure Dragon. His devil fruit essentially makes him a fish man. So while yes, he would lose all of his strength and all of his will and sink down to the bottom of the ocean, he'd still probably be able to breathe. So he would less end his life and more start his life living at the bottom of the ocean, still breathing. And sure, probably eventually he would die of either hunger or thirst, maybe. But that brings us to the second issue. Kaido didn't want to die some regular, undignified death. Kaido was jealous of how Goldie, Roger, and Whitebeard died. He was jealous that their lives burnt out in a massive explosion that cemented itself in history. Kaido wanted a big, important death. A death that would shake the world. And thus him drowning himself, or starving himself to death, or eating another devil fruit and exploding on Onigashima Island weren't necessarily the glorious deaths that he envisioned. He wanted to go out like the emperors before him, in a glorious ball of fire that would be worthy of the world's strongest creature. And thus, through his fight with Luffy, he got that. Luffy kind of gives Kaido exactly what he was looking for. But speaking of devil fruit users not being able to swim, we got a whole lot of that going on in our number 5 spot, because at our number 5 spot of One Piece's worst plot holes, we have Sanji not knowing that devil fruit users can't swim. See, during the Brattier arc, when Sanji is introduced, Luffy, after his battle against Don Krieg, who is coming back up on this list, mind you, is cast into the water using an iron net in a final Hail Mary attack from Don Krieg. And thus, as Luffy is not only caught up in this iron net, but also a devil fruit user, he begins to sink into the water. And as everybody else, that being Nami and Zoro, are currently indisposed, either stealing the Going Merry or bleeding from a giant Mihawk-inflicted wound, the only person who would be able to save Luffy was Sanji. However, the idea that Luffy as a devil fruit user would be unable to swim seems like information that Sanji didn't know. Like it was a surprise that Luffy couldn't swim. Now, this might seem like it makes sense considering the fact that Sanji himself is not a devil fruit user, and that nobody in Sanji's life up until Luffy has been a devil fruit user. And therefore, there's really no reason for Sanji to know that devil fruit users don't have the ability to swim. Except Sanji's obsessed with devil fruits. See, Sanji during the Thriller Bark arc reveals to Absalom, who has a devil fruit that makes him invisible, that it's been a lifelong dream of Sanji's to have Absalom's devil fruit, because he would use it to peek on women. But during this rant, Sanji reveals to Absalom that as a child, he read the encyclopedia of every single devil fruit religiously, meaning that Sanji for a long time has been obsessed with devil fruits, and therefore understands exactly what they do, and therefore should probably pretty feasibly understand the drawbacks that come along with devil fruits. It ties into the fact that when we get to the Whole Cake Island arc, we see that Sanji was raised by a military family who undoubtedly had to train how to fight against devil fruit users, and therefore is not only Sanji obsessed with devil fruit and compulsively read an encyclopedia of all of the devil fruits in existence, but he also has a military training background in a world dominated by devil fruit users. So how didn't Sanji know that Luffy was unable to swim? Well, it's a plot hole. Sure, you can say, oh, well, Sanji read that book 10 years ago. How do you expect him to remember every little detail from that encyclopedia? Or you can make the argument that Sanji's family didn't really like him and therefore he probably didn't get the best education. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, it's a plot hole. But on account of the fact that it is a deeply unimportant one, it's gonna get our number 5 spot. But since we're talking about women that Sanji probably would have peeped on if he could be invisible, coming up at number 4 on our list of One Piece's worst plot holes, we have Vivi being able to infiltrate Baroque works. This one's not great. So it's revealed in the Alabasta saga that Vivi, who is the princess of Alabasta, and Ingram, who's like her butler slash right-hand man, have spent 2 whole years infiltrating the Baroque works. So much time that Vivi, who has no legitimate combat ability, has been able to rise to the ranks of the Baroque works and gain the title of Miss Wednesday. And Vivi's disguise for becoming Miss Wednesday? Putting her hair in a ponytail. And like, not wearing a dress. Like, this is all well and good for the majority of the Alabasta arc. It's like, all right, but how would the people in the Baroque works know who Vivi was or what Vivi looked like? Until it's revealed that Crocodile is in charge of the Baroque works. You know, the guy who's been trying to take over Alabasta for years. The guy who's been specifically trying to undermine the royal family of Alabasta. You know, Crocodile, the well-known figure in Alabasta who knows the royal family. How did he not hear that Vivi was missing for 2 years? And maybe more importantly than that, is there no background checks to join the Baroque works? Hey, a girl who looks exactly like the missing princess and a guy with guns in his curled wig are here to join Crocodile. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Like, these are some of the most unique looking characters in all of One Piece, and somehow they're able to infiltrate the organization, actively trying to undermine their government. Ingram looks like a version of Judge Dredd from the 1700s. And mind you, his outfit change, nothing. And there's really no explanation for this plot hole. So we just gotta be like, well, you know, I mean, people don't recognize me in public when I'm not wearing my glasses. So like, it could be like the power of a high pony, you know, maybe. Legitimately, if there is an explanation for this one and I just missed it, tell me in the comments below. But since we're talking about missing things, let's get to our number 3 spot. Because our number 3 spot is missing a fair majority of his guts because he missed Haki class. Yep, you guessed it. Coming up at number 3 on our list of One Piece's worst plot holes, we have Ace never learning Haki. Listen, in the lead up to Marineford, we see that Ace and Blackbeard engage in a legendary battle as Ace tries to exact revenge on the traitorous Blackbeard. However, rather perplexingly, in this fight between two people who have legitimate aspirations of becoming the Pirate King, who served on Whitebeard's crew at a high level, who have been to the New World, neither of them use any Haki of any kind, which is even weirder on Ace's side of the equation here because A, he is the child of Goldie Roger, B, we saw him use Haki at 10 years old, and C, it's very much established in the Sabaody Archipelago arc that in order to go past Marie Joie and head into the New World, you need Haki. It is literally the entire point of the ending of the Sabaody Archipelago arc. Luffy and all of the Straw Hats stand no chance against the high-level opponents that exist in the New World. So much so that Kuma literally paw fruits them to a bunch of different places that they could train so they could specifically learn Haki. And yet Ace, one of the most important captains in Blackbeard's armada, does not know Haki. He can't use Ornament Haki to block the attacks of Aokiji. He can't engage in a Conqueror's Haki clash with Blackbeard when both of them were confirmed Conqueror Haki users, and he didn't use Ornament Haki to injure Blackbeard. And what's worse than this is that the reason that we're given as to why Blackbeard is able to injure Ace, even though his Flame Fruit makes him a Logia type and therefore untouchable by people who are not using Haki, is because of the specific abilities of Blackbeard's Darkness Fruit. And therefore, neither Ace nor Blackbeard, both of whom should have been high-level Haki users going into this fight, use Haki against each other. And I guess it's a moot point if neither of them use it, but still deeply odd. And this is obviously because basically everything revolving around Haki pre-time skip wasn't all that thought out by Oda, but there isn't really an in-universe explanation to explain why Ace nor Blackbeard used Haki in this fight. And thus, unfortunately, it is a plot hole. But is it as bad as a complete no-name who is so incredibly irrelevant they were literally cut from the One Piece live action somehow being able to sail across the Calm Belt? I'll leave that up to you, because coming up at number 2 on our list of One Piece's worst plot holes, we have Don Krieg leaving the Grand Line. Listen, getting to the Grand Line is actually a fair bit easier than getting off the Grand Line. To get onto the Grand Line, all one needs to do is ride up Reverse Mountain from whatever sea they're on, as Reverse Mountain connects to the North, South, East, and West Blue. And then after riding up Reverse Mountain, you'll be spit onto the Grand Line. However, in order to leave the Grand Line, you either need to go around the entirety of the Grand Line and get back to Reverse Mountain so you can go back down to one of the seas. This is likely how Buggy and Shanks got back after Goldie Roger got to Laugh Tale. You can go under the Red Line if you have a coded ship or are a fishman, or you can cross the Calm Belt, a stretch of calm waters on both sides of the Grand Line where no winds exist, making it all but impossible with traditional sailing methods to traverse through. Worse than this, both calm belts are also filled to the gills, all puns intended, with ridiculously powerful sea kings, and therefore the only certifiable way to get through the Calm Belt is to either have a sea fancy prism-lined ship like the Marines do, have more powerful sea kings like the Kuja pirates do, or simply have access to such a ridiculous amount of Haki that you can use Conqueror's Haki to back up any and all sea kings who try to make a move on your ship, like Shanks does, or like Rayleigh does, as he literally swam through the comm belt. But Don Krieg has none of those things. What's more than this is you also need a way to propel yourself through the comm belt. This is the other reason why the Kuja pirates have two sea kings strapped to the front of their pirate ship, because their sail doesn't work in the comm belt. Don Krieg doesn't have that. Now, the in-universe explanation to tell us why Don Krieg was able to escape from the Grand Line after Mihawk destroyed its entire armada was that they got fortunate with a storm that was able to propel them through the comm belt. But not only does this greatly oppose basically everything we know about the comm belt, Don Krieg would also need to somehow, some way avoid all of the sea kings that he definitely could not fight. Like, regardless of the fact that Don Krieg could be propelled through the comm belt by winds that shouldn't have been there, why did no sea kings try to destroy his one final ship? We don't know. Because somehow, some way, he made it across the comm belt with none of the things you need to make it across the comm belt. He got to be a character in the Baroque arc for like 4 episodes. And then his ship got cut in half by Mihawk. Not necessarily worth the plot hole, I would say, but hey, I'm not the one writing one of the most successful manga of all time. But unfortunately, even Don Krieg doing something that some of the most powerful pirates on Earth wouldn't be able to pull off is not the worst plot hole in all of One Piece. No, because that moment happened a little bit after Don Krieg, back in the Alabasta arc, because coming up at number 1 on our list of One Piece's worst plot holes, we have Pell surviving. Pell, for those of you who don't remember, is Vivi's other right-hand man, her left-hand man, if you shall. The one who doesn't put the judge and executioner and judge, jury, and executioner. The Hawk Man. Now, Alabasta ends in a kind of objectively silly way. Ignoring for a second that somehow, someway, Luffy was able to defeat Crocodile in a fight, Crocodile reveals that he's basically put a nuke in the center of Alabasta. And this bomb was so incredibly powerful it was supposed to destroy all of Alabasta. However, before this bomb is able to level at best a city, at worst a nation, Pell undergoes his devil fruit transformation into his gigantic Hawk Man form, and he scoops up Crocodile's bomb and flies it high into the sky, at which point the bomb explodes, and thus we're led to believe that Pell has sacrificed him for the greater good of Alabasta. But as the arc comes to its conclusion, after the Straw Hats have all left, we see Pell, relatively uninjured, visiting his own grave. It's never explained to us how he survived an explosion that should have leveled an entire island. Like, did he tank it? Was he fast enough to escape the explosion? Maybe, but we've seen him injured by far weaker attacks and caught surprised by far slower attacks. Nothing Pell ever demonstrated led us to believe that he could either tank that kind of explosion or escape it. And yet, he just does. So why does he get to do this? Well, because Oda hates killing characters. But is there an in-universe explanation? No. Not at all. He just eats a nuclear explosion to the face and is fine like 3 days later. It's objectively the silliest moment in all of One Piece. Does it matter? Not really. Pell's not an important character. But is it funny? Yeah, kind of. And is it a plot hole? Yeah, 100%. But do any of these plot holes make One Piece unwatchable? God, no. Like I said, One Piece has been running long enough that Oda's been able to patch up all of his previous plot holes with things that make you believe that he has future sight, but in actuality, he's just been writing the story for 25 years. But even with the week-by-week ability to patch up any hole he's ever created, you gotta admit, for a story as long as One Piece, the fact that I'm only able to find 4 real plot holes is wildly impressive. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. What do you think One Piece's most glaring plot hole is? Tell me in the comments below. And while I got you down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I filmed like an hour of content today, like an hour of like edited down YouTube content. My voice hurts so bad.